It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with Solange Mougin. Hi, Solange.
Hi.
Today you're going to talk about little green crosses.
Yes, the little neon green crosses representing France's 22,000 pharmacies that are sprinkled across the country. And for the fun anecdote, many pharmacies actually used to use red crosses. But in 1913, French law recognized the red symbol as that of the International Red Cross. So the green, with reference to the natural origin of medicine, became over time their symbol. And they also are so prevalent here that the French news channel France 3 aired a cinematic ode of sorts to them in 1996.
Lueur verte, comme suspendue aux façades des maisons. Et on s'étonne de leur multiplicité, de leur concentration en ce lieu envahi par la nuit.
Now, Solange, French pharmacies have been in the news recently because they've been given some new rights.
Yeah, France is in the midst of a doctor shortage, and the government has decided to expand a pilot program and allow pharmacies, as of January 2024, to sell certain antibiotics without a prescription, specifically for UTIs and strep throat.
Les infections urinaires, c'est vrai que le temps d'avoir un rendez-vous chez le médecin et d'avoir une ordonnance, des fois c'est compliqué.
Je trouve que c'est une très bonne chose qui aurait dû intervenir déjà depuis longtemps.
Now, some doctors fear that this is a slippery slope, but for many pharmacists, the required bacterial tests in the pharmacy will prevent that, and it'll also further anchor them as medical professionals rather than simply pill sellers.
On attend ça depuis longtemps, de pouvoir améliorer la prise en charge du patient. Nous, tous les jours, on a des patients qui viennent à qui on ne peut pas répondre parce que leur médecin ne peut pas les recevoir avant 10 jours.
Now, all that comes as actually many French people haven't been able to find what they need in their pharmacies.
Yeah, nearly 1 in 4 French people in the past year have not been able to find the drugs that they need. Medicine shortages are not a France-specific problem, but it is increasingly plaguing the country. Last year, 3,000 medications were either out of stock or close to being out of stock. Some patients have even dangerously turned to social media for their pills.
Même si la date de péremption arrivait à la fin, j'étais preneur pour pouvoir prendre ces cachets-là.
Le but, c'est que les gens ne se retrouvent pas sans médicaments à un moment ou à un autre, parce que la première cause de mortalité dans l'épilepsie, c'est quand même de ne pas avoir son traitement.
Now, the pandemic brought to light drug supply chain issues, as 40% of the medicine sold in Europe is made outside of it. Also, France is also losing ground in innovating new drugs, going from first to fifth in Europe. Now, the government is trying to remedy this, but it's not just a question of bringing assembly lines back to France. The population is aging, so more people need pills, and manufacturers, they actually don't always have strong financial incentives to produce the cheaper and more commonly used drugs.
And there's also a lot of waste. The government says they're actually interested in pharmacies selling certain antibiotics, not by the box, but by the pill.
Yeah, drugs being sold by the box is actually one of the things that really surprised me when I moved to France, in addition to the number of people that use thermometers not in the mouth and suppository use in general. But anyway, here you sometimes get more pills than what you need.
C'est vrai que ça fait un moment que je les ai pas utilisés. J'aurais eu 2, 3, 4, j'en ai pris que 3, il me reste tout ça.
Now, many people save their drugs and dangerously they automedicate later. On top of that, some 30% of French people do not realize the risk of taking expired medicine. Campaigns are ongoing to stop misuse and overuse, and to a degree, they are working. France is no longer the country that takes the most medicine as it was in the early 2000s. It is now thought to be in 7th place behind Brazil, Germany, Italy.
The government, in the meantime, does want to encourage pharmacies to perhaps produce their own medicine, especially if there are shortages.
Yeah, pharmacies today, of course, do not resemble the pharmacies of the 1970s or even those of the 1700s, where concoctions were made in-house.
Sont pour le moins insolites et se rapprochent beaucoup plus des médications chinoises que de la médecine moderne. Scolopendre, pied de chat, sang de dragon.
Mais il y a encore des pharmacies de quartier comme celle-ci où le client a encore une grande confiance dans son pharmacien et vient lui demander conseil. Nous préparons à cet effet un tas de préparations, des sirops, des suppositoires, du lait de beauté.
Now, today, some pharmacies are still accredited to make certain drugs, which brings us to our word of the day, une officine. This is a synonym for pharmacy or dispensary. With its Latin origin meaning atelier, it can also be used to mean a back room where things are concocted.
I didn't know that word. Thank you for that, Solange. Une officine. Okay, in addition to learning how to make drugs, how to sell drugs, pharmacists also have to study something called mycology. What's that?
That's the study of mushrooms and funguses, and not just the funguses between people's toes. Pharmacists actually have to learn to distinguish between toxic and edible mushrooms. In French culture, the pharmacist is often the person that people go to if they have a question about the mushrooms that they've picked.
À la base, qui est blanche avec à l'intérieur un reflet olivâtre. C'est la manite phalloïde, c'est le champignon qui tue. Donc ça, c'est vraiment le champignon à faire passer à tout le monde.
Now, becoming a pharmacist is no easy feat. It takes between 6 and 10 years of study to get the diploma, but finding work or even a pharmacy to take over, well, that is often less difficult, especially in rural areas where retiring pharmacists, they often actually have a hard time finding young people to work for them or to take over their shops because of this ever-changing job.
Well, Solange, thanks for that. It is important to have our pharmacists and to support our pharmacists here in France, so thank you for that. Don't forget, if you want to ask another question perhaps about France for a new French Connections, you can always reach out to Solange at S. Mougin.